Hey YouTube, happy Thursday. So this one here is not so much a breaking news video because although I've done a couple of those in the past, especially with grading related things, this already happened yesterday. So I'm not going to call it a breaking news video. It's not. Probably you may or may not have heard about this, but I'll quickly go over some of the details that came across in a lot of the videos and things that have come out with it. And I do want to talk a little bit about kind of the consequences in the downstream. Take a moment to talk about that as I kind of do a couple of videos here talking about some new happenings in the graded card side of things as we kind of lead into the weekend, and then we'll talk more about it on the live streams coming up over the weekend. So this one here is related to CSG, which this is basically the other one of the other shoe to drop after PSA did its suspension of a lot of the services. We talked about on this channel and on the live streams and all those areas that the more likelihood was a lot of these other third-party graders were also going to be impacted on it. SGC obviously famously had that big problem first. HGA had their own problems with, getting absolutely bombarded with over 33,000 people in a queue temporarily right after that happened with PSA announced that they were suspending a lot of the services. We knew that there were going to be some major issues. And CSG has shown little cracks in the armor. One of them being that they acknowledged that they were starting to get backlogged a little bit, going back on a podcast. I believe it was the Lucas Tigers and Bronze Oh My podcast. One of the representatives there acknowledged that they were starting to get a little bit of a backlog. And then on the website itself, they started showing that the turnaround times were starting to increase slowly. So there were signs that these things were starting to move. So it's been, 2 or 3 weeks, give or take, since PSA announced that it was suspending a lot of the services, other than the $300 and above. But you knew that they were going to start feeling the crunch, much the same way that Beckett is probably feeling the crunch, even though we don't know about them. It's still kind of a black box that way. And we knew SGC had its immediate strong response. So it was only a matter of time for CSG to take their turn. So I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. I'll leave a link into it if for whatever reason you haven't caught on to it, but I'll read it to you. But there are a couple of things here that I do want to take a moment to emphasize because I do think it's important. So quickly, I'll skim through this. So it's the usual kind of PR stuff. And of course, in accordance with what everybody else is doing, they do mention they are hiring more employees, 7 new employees in the last 3 months, purchased an additional 21,000 square feet of space. It's like out of the PR playbook right now in the sports card industry that we have to mention that we're hiring new people and we've got more space. We bought more space, guys. Everybody has bought more space, but they had to include it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to hit it on the bingo card. But anyway, so CSG also talks about it being part of the certified collectibles group because they're already part of a conglomerate of other third-party grading companies in other industries. Here we go. So in a highly fast-growing and highly competitive industry, CSG is paying the most competitive salaries. That's one that is a little bit different. They do mention that they're paying more to attract the best talent. So to support these and other efforts, as well as to better reflect the current state of the market, aka we're getting backed up, CSG is updating its fees and services effective April 28th, 2021. Now this is important. I want to get back to that in just 1 second, but the date is also important here. The new fees apply to all CSG online submission forms completed as of that date. Submission forms completed before April 28, 2021 must be delivered to CSG's facility by May 28th to qualify for the old pricing. So there's a window here. Now there is a plus and a minus to this, and this is very important. That's the part I want to focus on. They've increased prices, that's a very short headline. You just need to read the title and you're done. But the fact they gave you about a week, because this came out yesterday, so that came out on the 21st. So they gave you a week to have any online submission forms completed. So if you fill it out and it's ready to go within the next 6 days now, then it'll qualify under this. As long as they get it to their facility by May 28th, you will qualify for the old pricing. So you've still got a window of the better part of a week. And at the time this came out, you had a full week to make those arrangements and get yourself ready and get the stuff out the door so that you can meet this qualification and get the old pricing. And I'll do a little side by side with the old pricing since they're still available on the website so that we can kind of see what they did. So there's a couple of things related to that I'll get to in a second, but just remember that window because it is important to what I'm going to get to in a moment. So even with this price increase, CSG still offers the most advantageous fees in the sports card certification industry, which I agree is true, but I'm going to make a point about that in a second. We're on to so many collectors, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so here are the updated prices. So the unlimited walkthrough has no limit on it. It's $125 plus 1% of a fair market value. Walkthrough is $125. Express is $60, $30 for standard, $20 for economy, and $12 for bulk order. Now, they don't mention it here, but I believe these do not include the subgrades, which I believe is still a $10 premium. And when I go to the other one, we'll see the chart there as well. So we'll be able to do a little side-by-side comparison of the chart. And I also want to put special focus on the bulk rate here. So it's $12, and I believe it's $10 for subgrade. So let's call it $22 for the sake of argument, which is still highly competitive. And that means the bulk rate thing is still open. So that's important. So important reminder, please note these fee updates will apply to CSG online submission orders. So they're emphasizing again, completed on or after April 28th. The new fees will simply be reflected in the prices listed on the form. Submission forms completed before that must be delivered by May 28th to qualify for the old pricing. So that concludes the end of the article. Like I said, $125 to $12 at the low end. And then unlimited walkthrough is $125 plus 1% of final value fee. Okay, so let's take a look at the old one here. So this one here is still what's currently on the site. So if you submit it in before the 28th and then get it to them by May 28th, you will still be under these old fees. So starting at the unlimited walkthrough starts at $100 plus 1% final value fee. So $100 all the way down to $8. Now, I'm not going to go line by line in each one of these. So again, pretend that we're adding on $10 for the subgrades because realistically from a lot of cards, it's probably worth just getting the subgrade done. But anyway, so even if we take it as base value though, just to keep it simple, the bulk rate went up 50%, but it went from $8 to $12. Now here's the thing, they're starting to get backed up. Now imagine that a lot of bulk orders are starting to eat up a lot of their time and volume. Going from $8 to $12 or even $18 to $22, I think is barely going to be a drop in the bucket. Now that's the first thing. I wanted to make that emphasize that first because that's one that I haven't heard because now with the day I've had a chance to listen to some other folks' takes on this and we're going to be in relative alignment. Truthfully, there's not a lot of too much complication to it. It wasn't hard to figure that this was going to happen given the increase in demand and given that a lot of the demand of PSA kind of gave up by closing those other levels, basically would get transferred over to the other third-party graders. And a lot of them don't have the capacity to handle it. So in turn, that would create backlogs and probably force them into this type of action. And their choices really came down to, and I'll quickly creep back up here to the original press release here. I did skip ahead a little bit, but I want to make sure I read this. So CSG is aware the submitters are frustrated with longer turnaround times, but the caliber of our expert services must be maintained. They're committed to providing the highest level of services. And they also mentioned how it grew exponentially, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to see here if I can find... So in their Instagram post, they did also make reference to the fact that there were rumors and thoughts of the possibilities of either putting a cap or increasing prices. Obviously, they chose to increase prices. HGA has a cap as they're trying to ramp up their capacity. So you do have both of those options available to you as different ways of trying to get around the problem. And PSA obviously shut down the lower tier services, which was their way of kind of allowing them to catch up on the backlog. But anyway, so the first point that I made was that this increase isn't really that dramatic. Like if you take the walkthrough one, it goes from $100 to $125. So that's a 25% increase, which is obviously not nothing, but at the top tier, $25 on a $50,000 card, one way or the other, is probably not going to make that much of a difference. All the way down to the bulk rate, which really only increased $4 a card, which again, 50% increase. I'm not going to knock that and say that's nothing. But at the same time, if you're submitting a bunch of cards, likelihood is that's not going to dissuade you. Now combine this with the part that other people have talked about, where they've basically given you a week warning, which from a PR standpoint is really good. You're being transparent. You're making sure that people, aren't shocked. You've given them a little time to absorb it, and you're giving them a chance to react if they want to. You basically encourage, but you've also basically encouraged and induced them to being like, well, if you were going to submit a big bulk order and you were preparing it and kind of just lackadaisically taking your time, it's going to cost you $4 more per card. So if you're sending in 100 cards, that's an extra $400. Well, that might be a motivating factor to get a fire under your ass and maybe move a little bit quicker. If that turns out to be the case, well, then look forward to potentially over the next couple of weeks, CSG being even more slammed. Now, here's the question. Really what it comes down to is this. None of this is shocking, given what has happened. The question is then, did they just set themselves up for the double whammy of you gave a 1 week window for people now to react and potentially panic send a bunch of cards to you that will even increase those volumes that you're collecting even more so. And subsequent to that, did you not increase the price high enough or even after we cross that line that those bulk orders are not going to be abated in the least? Going from $8 to $12 if you ignore the subgrades, which on lower price cards, maybe you do, I guess, to save some money. But if that's the case, did you really do anything to even slow this thing down? If you basically put the hammer down and got some people to send you potentially a big bulk, maybe you increase your backlog, and then afterwards you're still not really slowing it down very much and you're still getting hammered, do you go back and do another price increase? Or do you use the other lever at your disposal and somehow try to restrict the submissions you'll take in? I'm just putting it out there as a question, because either way, that puts CSG in a very tenuous position. Just kind of my general thought process on that. So this is just another shoe to drop on the third-party grading thing. If you're not interested or not concerned about what CSG is doing, it's not really going to affect you. But it is good to note that the impact is being felt around the rest of the industry still. And the other players are slowly starting to acknowledge it. And now we're at a point where obviously SGC has had their price increase, CSG has had theirs. We haven't heard anything from Beckett, and I don't know if we will in the foreseeable future, but if we do, don't be surprised if it's another price increase or some kind of a restriction or something, some kind of a reaction on their part. HGA, I think, is going to keep chugging along doing the thing, and then we're still going to have to see what PSA does. Now, I do want to talk a little bit more about PSA and their recent acquisition in the AI field, we'll say, but that'll be a separate video. But I wanted to talk through this a little bit and really emphasize the point that I don't know if this price increase is actually going to do what they think it's going to do. And I think they may have created a great incentive for some people who are on the fence to submit them a ton of stuff. Maybe good for business, but we'll see what it looks like as far as the backlog is concerned. And we'll see if they have to revisit this again and maybe do something again with the pricing or put some kind of a cap or restriction on it. It'll be something to keep an eye on for sure. And definitely we'll have some time to chat about it some more during the live streams coming up this weekend. First one will be on Friday. It'll be 9:30 p.m. Eastern time, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. And I will probably have another video out maybe Friday or maybe later today related to the PSA side of things, because that's its own story that is warrants its own discussion. Anyway, any thoughts or comments in the comments section will be welcome, and I'll take a look and reply back as best I can. Do you have any thoughts on this? Does it concern you? Do you not care? If you don't care, maybe I'm curious why you watched the video. Maybe you can tell me that in the comments as well. Either way, thanks for listening and checking it out. We'll be back on the channel for more videos and things upcoming. If you've never been here before, check out some of the other videos on the channel. Leave a like if you like the video and subscribe if you haven't before. Thanks very much. We'll catch you in the next.